clear on that? All right. And to, if I could throw 2 cents onto that, you gotta, what, just 2 cents. Qᴜᴜsᴜ was saying, you gotta remember some of the charges. They charged Doc with 2 things primarily. One was the transporting of minors across state lines, and the other was RICO. All right, so you got to go back to the legal aspect of this. If y'all remember the first indictment, that would have fell flat on its face, as well as the state indictment. You had 8 to 9 officers of the court, law enforcement officers certified by the state of Georgia, ready to battle the state indictment according to the laws of Georgia. They knew they were going to have a hard time with that one. Plus, not to mention just how silly the charges were, how non-corroborative a lot of the witness statements were. You have one witness to say this party was there and witnessed it, but that party didn't mention it in their statements. It's a lot. But one of the things that they did charge with, once they realized that first indictment was going to fall flat on its face, even if it was just due to statute of limitations, or for the fact that some of the counts they were charging them with wasn't even illegal, they hurried up and did a re-indictment that they called a superseding indictment. Re-indictment is pretty much illegal. So they said it was a superseding indictment, but if y'all can dig it up and look at the 2 indictments, it's almost like they were charging 2 different people. Because the first indictment rarely correlated to the second indictment. And even at the appeal hearings, the tribunal judges there said, I'm not understanding how these counts weren't separated. It's something we kept asking for, to separate money structuring with transportation. Because the court said, I'm having a problem understanding how you do money structuring with transporting of children without a prostitution charge. Where's the money raised that was structured and not reported? Long story short, RICO was set up to go after mafias, organized crime families, right? These indictments indicted over 200 people. You had Doc, Kathy, the other young ladies, and over 200 John and Jane Does. And out of all of that, only 1 body is sitting in prison. How do you do that? How do you go from indicting over 200-something people? You're saying this is the Gambinos. You're saying we're something along that level. But then still, you only have 1 body at the end of the day. So just start spinning your wheels back in that direction, of the innocence of our master teacher, Father Bad, known affectionately to the world of Dr. Malachi Kᴜᴜ. But you have to keep that in mind. I mean, doing what he does as a master teacher, he constantly feeds us. But how do we reciprocate our appreciation for that? A lot of us, you can contribute legally, you can contribute your research, you can contribute however you want. But for some of us, the best way you can contribute is to go out there into the world with the facts of his innocence. So they end up charging him RICO because that killed the statute of limitations. It opened the door for all kind of things. And I ended on this note. When they said restructured money, they presented 4 little bank statements. We presented 1 bank statement of 1 total deposit that was almost 10 times more than the other 4 cumulatively. Did y'all understand what that means? Money structuring is when they say you deposit things in increments of less than $10,000 so it doesn't come up on the IRS radar. So they showed a little 4,000, a little 3,000, a little 8,000. We showed several deposit slips, one of which was in the hundreds of thousands by itself. 1. So how are we trying to hide a couple thousand, but we report $250,000 voluntarily? Just something to think about. Let's just put it out there. Let's just let them know out there in the world too. We still know what's up. We still know you're innocent. I know we get off to the reptilian thing, we get off to the spiritual thing, we get off to the esoteric thing, but don't think we still don't know how to get up here and charge you to get on that end of the table, and we stand on this end of the table and prove our positions on his innocence. See who get knocked out. Anyway, a lesson about reptilians. I know it's late, so we got the lesson and update. Likum aimum for you, my beloved wife and children. The Muhammad, humanoid beings of Aldebaran, pale skin, blonde, fur, blue eyes, and gray eyes, made a home base in Sahahtat or Orion, and came back and forth to the planet Earth. To the Nordic type, who are made by the Kamaku or the Pleiadians, who also had a base in Aldebaran. Tall Muhammad, humanoid beings from Kamahat, Pleiades, the 7-star system, with transparent fur, transparent skin, pale white, and transparent pale white eyes. They are flesh eaters. These beings work under Pa-Zahafu, the reptiles, or Pa-Muzhafu, the reptilians, originally from Dracos, the Draco star system. All these and other beings came to the Qᴜᴜ, the planet Earth, over many thousands of years. Some lived on land, others lived inside caverns, and some beneath the waters, while some stayed in crafts above. In the caverns are many tunnels that were made and are being found today. And you had the Anunnaki who came seeking gold. all was under the rules of respect by the Natharu, the divine ones, the overseers, who ruled Orion and Sirius by way of another star system called Razak, or Riz, in Ilion, of the 19th parallel universe to this one. The most disobedient and rebellious was just one group of the reptilians, but there are many species of reptilians. 3 main ones came to this planet seeking food of a certain nature. Now, Nᴏᴜᴏᴜns, you are what you eat, and their nature called for Dawo, or evil spirited creatures, to eat you. It would be the same as seeking wild beasts for food, such as canines, wolves, felines, lions, grizzly bears, those who were carnivorous for the nature in them, the wild. They needed the flesh and blood, and it's best when the adrenaline is at its highest from fear, terror, or fright. To them, that is when it tastes the best. So over time, Pᴇᴜ, the evil reptilians, evolved on this planet, as well as the nearby Draconis, the brightest star and the aptly named serpentine-shaped constellation of Draco, or Draco, in Latin, Roman, the word for dragon. Draco is circumpolar, it never sets. For those who look or observe in the northern hemisphere's night skies, it was one of the 48 constellations listed by the 2nd century astronomer, the Greek Egyptian named Ptolemy. And to date, is still one of the now recorded 88 modern constellations. Yes, Nᴏᴜᴜns, the 88 is related to the 88 keys on a complete piano for the tones. So in time, these 2 reptilians resided from these 2 vastly distant planets, Earth, Serpentine. One helped the other star systems, while the other went to Andromeda with insect-looking things to breed greys. They bred greys to use them to invade other planets for food of a certain nature. They also ate some of the grey species. So you had agreeables and disagreeables, the Muzhafu, or the evil reptilians, and the Mudganu, or the good reptilians. Both would come to this planet for their own reasons and purposes. The Anunnaki was mixed with humanoids and reptilians. Some reptilians were under the Riskians, and others joined and ruled the Kamaku, or the Pleiadians, who in turn became 2 species. As the Anunnaki became 2 species as well, the Dingir and the Ikiki. Later in the Bible, these became angelic species, the Seraphim and the Cherubim. In all, they became the deities called God, or gods, Lord, lords, angels, and devils of different languages, such as Hebrew, Arabic, Greek, Latin, and subdialects, but the same beings. The Bible and the Qur'an are of the same extraterrestrials. Many titles, names, and attributes, but they had offsprings, male and female. The Arabic, the Qur'an, was Al, or the Mighty One. The Hebrew, El Shaddai, or El Shadi, the Mighty One. The same exact being. Most religious persons today have a trance cast over them to make them forget the past. It's called amnesia, to be forgetful, forgot. They don't remember that they worship beings from the star systems above, with it right in the Bible, Job 9:9, Job 38:31, Amos 5:8, and the Quran 53:49. Yet they don't see it. Or how about the many times it says they came down to earth and raised up to heaven, from here to there. They can't seem to see while under a spell of faith. Nᴏᴜᴜns, the 2 species, the Zahafu, evil reptilians, and the Daganu, good reptilians, evolved, and they replaced this knowledge with astrology. This was known to the overlords of the Draconian reptilians, that one species, Pᴇᴜ, the evil reptilians, was or is evil and wicked-spirited by their very nature, a warrior species, very deceptive and manipulative, as you see in Enlil. While the other species, the Mudganu, good reptilians, the earthly reptoids, were peaceful, good-hearted, and as you see in Enki. The Muzhafu, the evil reptilians or the Draconians, were so devolved that, like the insects of Andromeda and Arcturians, they were very carnivorous. These Muzhafu, the evil reptilians, had a need or have a need to eat meat, flesh, and drink blood. They have a need for solid foods and develop the ability to ingest their nutrients through pure energies of the spirit of their prey. It's called Ur-Shamgar, who were of the Irin, or Pᴇᴜ, the Watchers. You find this recorded in the book of Enoch, 1 Enoch 6, verses 7 through 8, as the head of the 200 fallen angels, Shemyaza, Samael, Shemyazaz, Semenza, with many other names and titles. These fallen angels mixed with the Adamite women, Genesis 6, 1 through 5, as recorded in their holy book of Daniel 4, 17, the teachers of evil, 1 Enoch chapter 9, verses 5 through 14, 1 Enoch chapter 10, verses 12 through 13, verses 18 through 20, chapter 7, verses 1 through 14. All that's the book of Enoch. These beings worked with the reptilians in the making of a man called Adam, the pale race, with the DNA of the Mukmahu, or the Pleiadians, 6,000 years ago. who also had 46 chromosomes, to become workers, slaves, and food, the Lulu and the Lulu. Yet the Wapians, let's get back to the reptilians and the reptoids. Pa-Mushafu, the evil reptilians, learned to shapeshift from Pa-Mukmahu, the Pleiadians, and are now, or up to 2000 AD, on the planet Earth in human form. They are taking over governments one by one, but now have been exposed to many, yet many still don't or won't accept these facts, such as their lust for frightened animals and human flesh, a race they bred for just that. Offspring of the Adamite women and the Nephilim, the Nephilims. Their hunger was much too great, so they turned on their own to kill and eat. It had to be a Dawu, energy source, evil energy source like themselves. So in order to survive, they must ingest pure Jawed, or wicked Dawu, evil, spirit, or energy. 6 etheric blood and flesh, unnatural nature energy. So it is this fact alone that turns simple self-preservation into grafting a group of Greys for their evil agenda. Greys who are used in abductions, testing, and breeding with the Muhmamdu, or the humanoids. In order to survive here on this planet, they must interbreed within a 400-year cycle to 100 years. So they created a group of alien Greys as their slave species, cloned as a source for nutrition after breeding with the Adamites in the last 2,000 of the 6,000 years. 2,000 years ago, there was a seed transported to Earth in Gabor, Gabriel, ＪİBْرāīl, and by a male, Joseph, implanted in her, Mary, by the Holy or pure Spirit, for the reptoid seed to carry on. This seed was called Emmanuel, Matthew 1:18-23, as it states, for that seed, which is conceived in her, is of the pure ghost. Holy means pure, ghost means spirit in Hebrew. The craft was sighted by a Mesopotamian priest, the Magi, who followed it to where the seed was. Originally, they were from Egypt, Arabia, and Persia, and they came to confirm the reptoid was born, a god in flesh, a flesh-eating El of the Elohim, who called his father and his god Eli, my own El, Matthew 27:46, who left him. He said, I am not of this world, I am from above, John 8:23, and his spiritual father was in Orion, Matthew 6:9, where you see heaven in the Greek, as Hebrew Strong's number 3772. Orion, Oranos, the star system. This is their Yeshua, Yahshua, Jesus, Isa, Jesus, Jah, Jesus. He was born to deliver them up to the Elohim, the gods. He ate meat, flesh, John 21:5, Luke 24:41. So the Wapians, most who follow the religions of Adamites and the covenant of the flesh eaters don't really know what is meant by living in the blood of Christ. By his blood, symbolic of wine, blood and bread, which is flesh, or that their God or gods or angels were in fact flesh eaters. Genesis 18:1-8. They came down to kill people in Sodom, but stopped to eat the flesh of a calf with Ibrahim, who was a Mesopotamian named Ibrahim. He made the covenant, Genesis 17:1-14, with that Almighty God, Hebrew Strong's number 7706, El Shaddai, the Almighty Devil or Demon. As you see in Deuteronomy 32:17, when you see devils, it's Hebrew Strong's number 7700, which is the same word, Shad. As you see, Nawapians, it is the same as the word Shadia, Hebrew Strong's 7706, the mighty demon, and in Arabic of the Quran, El Shadid. They can't see these actual facts, or who and what they worship in the blood. The covenant as a word means to eat meat, Hebrew Strong's number 1285, Genesis 17:2, berith, which means to cut or cutting. Yet it is from the root Hebrew word, Strong's number 1262, bara, which means to eat meat or feed meat. So it was called the covenant of the flesh. The way to attract their God or their gods was by much blood. As you read 1 Kings 18:28, these Israelites, Jacobites of the Hebrew seed, cried out to their Elohim, but they did not come. So Elijah, El Yahweh, said to do this in 1 Kings 18:27. And it came to pass at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, cry aloud, for he is an Elohim, a God. Either he is talking or he is persing, which means hunting, or he is in a journey, traveling, or peradventure, perhaps, he's sleeping. He, God, is sleeping, and he must be awakened. Now, Nawapians, look at what the very next verse says in 28. This is what he tells them to do. And they cried aloud and cut themselves after the manner with knives and lances till the blood gushed out upon them. So you see, to attract their Elohim, they had to cut open their own flesh. so that their blood gushed out on them. Why is that? Look back at Leviticus chapter 1. And you see that Elohim loves the smell of offerings, sacrifices of flesh and blood. He smells it. If you look back at 1 Kings 18:24, it shows how to call on the Elohim, Baal or Yahweh, and that is by killing animals in verse 25. To dress it as you see in Genesis 18:7, as Abraham did for this God, and the two angels to eat. Dressing it means to prepare it, to cut it up and skin it. That is blood, flesh, as in Genesis 8:20-21. The Lord smelled a sweet savor. Leviticus 4:16. So blood and flesh on altars was the covenant made with these Elohims, who ate flesh and even humanoids, which they had made. This is the same seed of the Quran 3, verses 33. Verse 33. The same gods, Elohim in Hebrew, it's El and Alihat, which is Allah, so plural for Allah, in the Arabic Quran. And who is behind this and why? My beloved, fear not. They prefer the white meat, not the dark. Like pig is the other white meat. They made them in the image of the Mukmaku, the Pleiadians, not you who are from the Father, the divine ones, pure black seed. The dark meat is not what they chose to rape and breed with. Genesis 6:1-4. The books of Enoch, as well as the book of Jubilees, the Sumerian stone tablets, and others that they hide from you. It is all about their seed from Adam to Muhammad to Joseph Smith, their last hope, Mormonism, which they rejected, and they killed their prophet, Joseph Smith. The one who did all this created their religion and enslaved them mentally by blind faith. Those Kamaku, Pleiadians, who protected their own, were being used as food by the Zahafu reptilians, the evil reptilians, of Draco, Dragon, or Dracula. The reptoids tried to help and guide them, but they rejected it. Daganu, over and over for Zahafu, Draco, Dragon, or Dracula. Evil, Zahafu, or the Musafu, evil reptilians. Good is Daganu, or the Mudganu, the reptoids. The Tanaku, Draconians, have or had, up to the year 2000 AD, an evil, wicked agenda. In order to survive here on this planet, they had to create what you know as one group of alien race as their slave species, cloned as a source of nutrition. As the Tanan, Draconians, empire continued to grow and expand from planet to planet, they had problems. Their many in number made the small graves weary of being drained. So, the Mudganu, the reptoids, came and freed them from the reptilians, their capturers. The reptiles cloned them to use their negative energies, as this is what they must eat, as their offspring, these past 6,000 years. The seed of Adam must eat flesh with each meal, 3 times a day. They must do as their overlords, kill to eat, raise animals to eat. As you read in Genesis 4, verse 2, their Yahweh of Elohim taught them to raise animals for offering to them to eat. But the Mudganu, the reptoids, Inky, told them, don't eat the flesh. Genesis 3:17. Eat of the ground all your life. Genesis 1:29-30. Both Adamites and creatures should not eat flesh, only herbs. This is what one of the brothers, Inky, said. But after the flood, his brother Enlil said, you may kill and eat flesh. In Genesis 9:3. Genesis 9:4. But they feared these Adamites, now mixed with the Nephilim, will eat and kill them. So as you read in Genesis 9:4-7, it states, you don't kill each other, but only I will require it. Hebrew Strong's 1875, which is the darash, to pursue, inquire, require, or search, to seek. The Elohim can require human flesh or animal, but they should not require another. This is after Cain killed Abel. So they were made as food to be eaten by their makers. But after mixing their DNA with the Nephilim, their offspring did start to kill and kill each other. 1 Enoch 7:11-14, and Jubilee 5:1-3. They feared being attacked and killed and eaten by their own creation, so they made laws, religious laws, in books from tablets by Tammuz, in Ezekiel 8:12. Inanna, or Ishtar, the daughter of Nanna. Once the graves were freed, they returned to Orion's belt in Zeta, and they were used to help teach humanoids. So there was a revolving of the graves, which led to their freedom from consumptive bondage of their makers, the draconian reptilians. Once they left their captives for Orion's belt beneath the center sun. But then, bereft of their evil energized cloned slave graves, the Musafu reptilians desperately needed a new source, or to return to eating Pa, Mukmaku, the Pleiadians, for evil nutrition. So they set out in their mighty but evil fleet of crabs, Psalms 68:17, 20,000 crabs, or chariots, and thousands of them came to earth. after seeking other planets that had populations on which they could feed. However, the energies were not evil, so they came up with a plan 8,500 years ago about this planet. The very first attempts to breed failed. Then around 6,000 years ago, Enki himself, in Genesis 1:2, came down. Being part reptilian or a reptoid, he terraformed this planet and set out to make a new creature, Genesis 1:26. Later, his brother Enlil made sure that evil was in their seed, Genesis 6:1. And amongst them was also cannibalism, as you read in 2 Kings, chapter 6, verse 28 to 29, Leviticus 26:29, Deuteronomy 28:53, Lamentations 2:20, 4:10, Jeremiah 19:9, and Revelations 19:16 through 18. So there was food and gold on earth, but the reptoids of Enki, or the Dingir, would always step in and try to guide mankind, the Adamite race of Hebrew Strong's number 120, the ruddy people, the white meat, that both the Mugmahu Pleiadians and the Mazahu reptilians love to abduct and eat. People today say this person or that person has gone missing, just up and gone, never to be seen again. Well, in the cinema, the fourth kind, it is laid out for them, and they even spoke in Sumerian to let all know who they are and who they are taking, the Kakasu, the Caucasoids. Pad Medganu, the reptoids, were benevolent and good-spirited. They are highly advanced, yet peaceful reptilian humanoids who also shapeshift can look black or pale. All who took part agreed not to mix with the seed of Panadaru, the divine ones, and the Nagaru Salah, the Negroid race. This was a much later violation by the Kakasu Caucasoids, and now you have mixed Caucasoid and Negroids called neutrinoids. Yet they belong only to the Nagaru Salah, Negroid race, whether they accept that DNA as a fact or not. Remember, in order for the Nephilium to mix with the Adamite women in Genesis 6, they must have had the same amount of chromosomes, 46. The reptilians did not have the same, but the Mugmahu Pleiadians did have 46 chromosomes, causing leprosy on the earth and all other diseases. However, far more important to the Draconians were the indigenous Ptah-ites or Tah-ites of the planet because of this thing called the Ba'a, the soul, which they do not have. Yet they can only get to the soul if the Nagaru will offer it to them of their own free will. That was why religions world over were watered down to meet what each race thinks will help them in life and after. So to willingly accept the Abrahamism religions is to welcome the reptilians to your soul. Once in, you seem to become blind to all facts and truth and what is called belief and faith. To unseen forces, you give whichever name. So you offer your soul just as they show in their cinemas of Dracula. A person has to welcome Dracula into their homes or lives. The same is done in the religions of Abraham, in the mitzvah of Mosesism, the baptism of Jesusism, or the shahadat or of Mohammedism. You offer your very soul to them, which they can't claim until you're dead and out of the flesh, so you can't regain it before them. They set a plan in motion to use their offspring, Adamites, to utilize the human population on earth as the source for the evil energy nutrition, Genesis 6:5. They first needed to eliminate the facts with faith for their religious and or political agenda and manipulate the human races by way of the evil minds, the Adamite race, the Caucasoids, and those who by mixing accept them or think they are accepted by them. So 6,000 years ago, or 4,000 BC, the plan was in place to make a double race, weak and wicked, to rule, to have dominion for only 6,000 years, then return to them, to take them off the planet to be food, called the rapture, John 4:32-35. The 4 months is the 4,000 years before 2,000 years ago, or from 4,000 BC to 2000 AD, Genesis 1:26. However, Nuwapians, they were not obedient to their maker and even ate their own children. They became flesh eaters, lusters of all other races, when it was stated before them in the Grand Council, Psalms 82, they could not agree, Psalms 83, 1-7. So this new seed of Adamites rebelled over and over in their holy books, the Bible, the Quran, and others lost or hidden from you. Their end has come in 2000 AD. You see them fallen as you read in the book of Revelations 18 and 19. And many of the Nagaru or Negroid Salah race have given their souls over to them by way of religions. And you can't tell them otherwise, right wisdom or the true past. Now stop and think, Nuwapians. Ask yourself, as you look around, who gave the Caucasoid race authority? Who says they can make laws, govern, imprison, kill, war, or tax you? Who says they have authority over you in any way at all? Think. You must have accepted that race as your authority. Why? Do you welcome these Dracularities or Dracularites into your lives at all? Break the spell of ignorance now before it's too late. End their story, his story. Nuwapians, look around you. They have been telling their religious salvation story for thousands of years. Each time, it changed a little, but the end results are the same. They keep saying it will come, but it does not. So they made it come in the form of books, stories, and cinemas. They created their lies, and once they see nothing happens each time, they predict next. They will say, well, he or Jesus or the Messiah is just coming soon. Be they Mosesites, Jesusites, or Mohammedites, they repeat over and over, soon. But their soon never comes, and it never will come. So they make it come by books, like Left Behind. Then make those books into cinemas, to make them feel that it happened. The same with other groups of the Abrahamites. The truth is, they all live a lie. A fiction, legends, made up by them. Only hopes, called faith, beliefs, and they live and die and suffer as all others. Each time, there's a good result. They say thank God. But if it's bad, they say nothing. A child dies, a car crashes, or a plane. Families die in war. Who do they thank then? But if things go well, they thank an unseen, unfelt, unheard source. Time to wake up from their lies they created, so other races worship and fear them. It is time to take back your lives. It is time to take back your souls. It is time to take back your authority. It is time to take back your freedom. It is time to take back your children. It is time to take back your future. It is time to remember your great past. It is time to clean yourselves inside out and outside in of his authorities in all ways in your lives. Give him back his image. Give him back his likeness. Give him back his languages. Give him back his religions. Give him back his evil, wicked way of living. Their dominion and their time is up as of the year 2000 AD, or Adam's dominion. It is over for them. Watch as they fade out world over. First, loss of respect, then loss of fear, then loss of trust. They plot and plan. Their plot and plan ET failed. Nawapians, you have the actual facts now. Take them to the world. Wake up, people. Break the spell. Now or never. I came. I taught. I will depart. You have the medicine to cure the sick world of their disease. Fact. To fiction. Truth to lies. Ontology to theology. Astronomy to astrology. Fate to fate. To faith. Excuse me. That's it. Go right into the thing. Hatep. Have you noticed that all the pictures during a certain era had the angels and baby angels that had their hands posed in a certain manner, where two fingers are bent in the middle, and the index finger and the pinky finger are pointed out? It looks like the satanic symbol. Many artists painted hands like that in many religious paintings. That hand sign is for Shadi or Shad, the demon from Deuteronomy 32:17. They sacrifice unto devils, Shad, number 7700, not to God or to gods whom they knew, not to new gods that came, whom your fathers feared not. And Leviticus 17:7. And they shall no more offer their sacrifices unto devils, Sair, or the devil, the he-goat, after whom they have gone a-whoring. This shall be a statute forever unto them throughout their generations. The satyr, the goat, or the Baphomet, who also uses this hand symbol, is a known symbol of the devil. The name for the God Almighty is El Shaddai, which comes from the root word shed. Why would the name of God, that has come from the root word of a demon? A name kept sacred and not even said out loud, yet worshipped in secret through symbols or a letter, the Hebrew letter Shin. A name that brought fear to be spoken and as referred to as the name Hashem. Most people may not be aware, however, Malaysia and China are allies during the Vietnam War. The conflict between Japan and China is that Japan was taking many items that belonged to China, so now China is taking them back. Japan is selling to Americas, yet not really buying. Now the issue with racism with Donald Sterling, the manager of the basketball team, that is the current mind of the country. It is being revealed and the whole world is seeing it. This is another symbol of the fall mentioned in the Bible, Revelations. Babylon is fallen, fallen. Did you hear about the man put to death with lethal injection and how his veins popped? When they came to take the man to execute him, he fought. They tasered a numerous amount of times. That electricity was still running through his body. So when he was injected, his veins popped. The truth is, they didn't have to sentence him. The judge actually went further than she should have. Now look at the results. All because of the sickness of racism. Have you all noticed the MERS, the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome virus? They say it came from the one-hump camel. Well, who rides camels? it looks like that was for a specific people. However, as so many have mixed in, as they travel abroad, they have reported a case in Indiana. There has been a death toll of approximately 109 and 27 sick. Ebola is also spreading, and last year, they mentioned of the bubonic plague from a park. In Genesis, when it speaks of my spirit will not always dwell or strive with man, the word, Genesis 6:3. And the Lord said, my spirit, which is the ruach, or the wind, should not always strive or deem, judge with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. This is actually referring to a craft. This verse would actually translate as my spirit will not actually judge man. The word for spirit, you will find this same word in Genesis 1:2. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the ruach, 7307, a wind of God, moved, or rafat, or moved, upon the face of the waters. That speaks about a spirit hovering over or above the water. Crabs hover or shake. Spirits do not. Travel safely, so. Questions?
I have two. Can you reference me to a place where I can get more information on Joseph Smith and did you write a book about Joseph Smith?
Several actually. I mean, you can even go back to the debates with Christians. The Doc actually goes in a lot when he first introduced it to us, if you weren't aware already, or if you wasn't a Mormon and became a Watchman. But he also refers to these individuals in the Holy Tablets, and more recent updates as well, where Father Yᴏᴜᴜ had explained that Joseph Smith was actually their last hope, and they actually rejected him and turned him down, but it's more elaborate inside the reading. Other than that, it's not coming to that.
Thank you. And about the Pleiadians, well, I was watching Q&A class where they was talking about the Pleiadians being part of the Yoruba tradition now. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, the misconception amongst the religion of Europe is that the Airᴅ were African ancestors, and they are not. The Airᴅ were actually the result of the Hindu demons migrating out of the Middle East into Africa when they were ran out of that area, and they brought with them their deities, their practices, the flesh eating. Because in some way, shape, or form, when you acknowledge the Airᴅ of Europe, you got to give them something that a person on this side of the world wants to have. A cigar, some brandy, some meat. You got to cut something. You got to kill something. It's going to be some bloodshed. And Father Yᴏᴜᴜ, that when those evil East Indians, or the descendants of those Aryans, those who were also worshiping the Enlilites or the Agigiites, they brought that all down from there. And the Pleiadians influenced that. The Agigi influenced that. A lot of beings have come in and treated Earth as their melting pot. Anytime Panatharu step in, a part of the Murazaku, our providers, have a plan, everybody wants in on it. But to bring it back more specific, that when they speak of, it's not coming to me right now, but the realm where they say the Arisha dwell, that's all tying into the 200 fallen angels who came down, and Doc goes into more, some I can't remember the Potteract at the time, but he named them, and he goes into what ways of life they influenced. Some of the 200 fallen angels were known as the cutters, some were known as killers, some was known, you get what I'm saying, they all had different attributes. And if you notice, you'll see a lot of parallel and similarities between the 200 fallen angels and the Arisha. And they may not like it when they say it, but it has nothing to do with us. Just in this update, Father Yᴏᴜᴜ said their whole goal was to get us to a point where we absorb religions that in some way, shape, or form involve bloodletting, so that it will call them down to dine on the feast of men. If you're African, if you're a Nadar, you're the children of the Nadar, they don't care who you worship, as long as it's not yourself. And in some way, shape, or form, I guarantee that deity wants some kind of blood. So it's not just the Arisha that proved here in the Bible. You know, you read where when the three angels came and visited Abraham, he knew immediately, I better start getting them some meat. Or there's a high probability I'll become the meat. And oh, by the way, once they were full, down the corners of their mouth said, Abraham, you all right, we're going to let you live another day. They went right over and murdered thousands of people, according to their own story. And Sodom, right? So, again, the Pleiadians, the reason that effort ties into them is because if you go back and the doctors break it down, the Enlilites or the Igigaites were feasting on them, the Muzafu, or the evil Draconians, or the evil reptilians, were feeding on the Mukmafu or the Pleiadians. So this goes back to when the Pleiadians had recruited the Thule Society through Madame Blavatsky and all these people. What's actually been happening over the years, Doc said, it goes back to the covenant of circumcision. He said originally, this is why the Lord pops up all the time. He pops up in Genesis, then the Lord will come down in Exodus, and in some way, shape, or form, somebody got to cut something, burn something, splash some blood somewhere, arrange some pieces of meat the right way, or you become the meat. All throughout the scriptures. And the reason for that is because they came in ancient times. You remember, this is their plan, this is their plan 6,000 years ago to breed a food alternative, the Pleiadians. So they came down and started breeding another form of white meat because the Draconians or the Muzafu preferred their meat, and the Pleiadians are pale. They have pale, transparent skin, transparent hair and eyes, just like the Caucasus here. So they try to offer another food alternative. So that's where religion started, and most of the religions, in some way, shape, or form, is just choice breeding of good meat. And then Doc had explained in past updates that they weren't reproducing fast enough, so they came with the covenant of circumcision. And what the circumcision did was took some of the meat off the phallic of the male and made it more sensitive, so he would ejaculate faster and reproduce at a faster rate, so he can produce bigger herds faster. All right, so going back into that, so whether it's Yoruba, whether it's Islam, Christianity, Judaism, somebody's cutting something, somebody's bleeding, and somebody's offering some god something with some meat and some blood on the plate. You got the altar, grill, barbecue, all the same thing. So that's where that comes from. Because a lot of us, as you start nearing that 80 gate, you start feeling the change in the polarity in the planet that Panatharva started as the sun cycle began to come in. It translates to something that you know. You know something is not right with this world, and you know you need to make a difference, but you can only go with what you know before you came across the books. So some of us went back to church. But then some of us became aware enough that the church ain't the answer. We've been religious since slavery, and nothing happened. So we, some way, shape, or form, you knew, okay, this white Jesus ain't the answer. And I ain't really feeling the law. So I want to be conscious. So I'm going to grow my dreads. I want to still smoke. Still want to drink. I still want to hit some bass thumping. So somebody invites you to a bembe, and boom, you got it all right there. You got the drums. You got the funny dressed people, ladies. You got the mood in the air because of the alcohol. You got the smoke in the air, and everything is there. But I feel justified being here because somebody said Africa, because somebody said Nigeria, and then when somebody said Yoruba, Orisha, those are your ancestors, and you feel that that's okay. But what that was that sin lying at the door, because they knew this day would come, the awakening would come just internally. The DNA would explode, and you would know this ain't right, and I need to do something. So they laid Yoruba in front of you before you made your way back to Unawad. Because it was just Africa enough. It was black enough. You had the drum. You had the beats. You had everything there that made you feel like you were awakening. But in actuality, they were putting you closer to the bloodthirsty gods and the flesh eaters than you were in Christianity. Because modern day Christians go to church and eat a little chicken and feel good at the end of the day. The Yoruba practices is still spilling blood. Somebody right now as we speak is getting a reading done, and they're being told you're possessed, and you gotta go get some chickens, and we're gonna sacrifice the chickens so the spirits jump out of your body into the chicken, and then we need you to go bury the chicken somewhere. Immediately, they start attributing you to the death of a being that had parents. Immediately, they start attributing you to the exposure of blood. So you actually are diving deeper, and you jump out of the frying pan into the fire. And that's why Panatharva had to make that linkage between the Pleiadians and Europe, because that's the result of the Pleiadians' plan to offer alternative food sources to themselves, to their overlords. Any other questions? I briefly wanted to retouch the question that was asked last week about Abraham, Genesis 15, 13 through 16, right at the end of class. Because a lot of us who go back in all the degrees that Panatharva Yanun, the master teacher, have given us, we spent most of that time thinking we were under that covenant. Remember? Y'all remember around 93, Doc said we lost the covenant? Well, some of us almost lost it. He said, who? Yeah, he said he gave it to the Midianites. He's like, oh, what am I gonna do now? But when you become a student teacher of the master teacher, one of the most simplified jewels that you're given is when someone asks you a question, right there on the spot, you got to try to read from where they're coming. Are they coming from a scientific background when they ask me that? Or they're coming from a staunch Christian background when they ask you that? Or they're coming from an Islamic background, a Masonic background, an atheist? Or they just nuts? So once you think you've done your best as a student teacher to identify where they're coming from, you have to meet them on that plane. So when did we hear for the first time that Genesis 15, 13, 16 apply to us? Now, what degree, when? Give me some dates, what year do y'all think Ponder Babylon first introduced it to us? Yell it out.
1972.
Right. Okay. So, I referenced a tape last week where Doc had just got back from overseas. It's an old tape. Early 80s, maybe like 70s. And he goes right into it. And he starts talking about the quantum mechanics and how Allah had to create a state conducive to star creation. Because if there was nothing, by the general term of nothing, because we already know it means something, but that means their Allah had to create a box conducive to put something in. And right then and there, Doc was trying to take us into pop quiz. He was trying to take us into quantum physics. And he did a nice build, and then right after that, somebody asked him about what? Abraham. So we didn't want to hear what he had to say when he came with Unubu, Asanubu, Nalanubu, Witnuwapu. We didn't want to hear that. After he gave it to us, immediately we asked him about Abraham. So, as a master teacher who taught us as student teachers, I got to try to see where you're from when you ask me that question. So we were coming from Jim Crow. We were coming from slavery. We were coming from being beat down, unimportant, less than human. You get what I'm saying? But at the same time, a movement, we were coming out of a movement. Civil rights, black awareness, black power, Nation Islam was growing. So you had two major things going on. Islam and the revolution, right? So a lot of us, once you broke out of Christianity, you learned that a lot of us should be on the millah, or the deen, in some way, shape, or form. Because whether you was a Christian or a Muslim, you gave homage to Ibrahim. So we weren't hearing nothing Doc had to say until he brought up Abraham. And you had two major groups that were big then. I'm trying to keep it short as possible. The Nation Islam was very big at that time. Who was the founder of the Nation Islam? Speak up, Muhammad. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Who was a student of who? Master Farah Muhammad. But both of them attended a temple in Detroit. Under who? Who was taught by who? Through Salih. So, both of them, in some way, shape, or form, came from out of the Quran, Circle 7. Right? And on page 47 of the Quran, Circle 7, the Prophet Noble Ali, Doc says, was right and exact, addressed us as Moabites, Hamathites, and Canaanites. Right? You gotta remember, this is the era, that was the environment, the world or the state that black awareness was in. That was the height of it when Doc came on the scene. So Wunuwap was way over here. So he had to dial it down. But like I said, whether it's Jesusism, Mosesism, or Islam, everybody's gonna go back to Father Abraham. And Doc said 7 people came. That's why the Quran Circle 7, with the 4 quadrants around it, if you remember the picture. He said the first of the 7 in the opening of the 7 seals was the Messiah. Second was the Comforter. Third was the Mahdi. Fourth was the Liberator, which was Marcus Garvey. The 5th, he said, was the Prophet Noble Ali. The 6th was the Messenger, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And the 7th was Ponder Babylon. He said many good men came in between the Liberator and himself. But in some way, shape, or form, all they could repeat was what something the other 7 said. So when you analyze all those beings, in some way, shape, or form, it was going back to Abraham, isn't it? So Doc said the Prophet Noble Ali was right when he said we were Moabites, Hamathites, and Canaanites. But we, with our racism that we had just learned, right racism, we thought he meant the pale Canaanite. We didn't give the Prophet Noble Ali the time to explain. He meant Hamath, out of Canaan. That's why we were the Canaanite. He didn't never say we were all 11, the leprous tribes of Canaan. He only mentions throughout the Quran Circle 7, 1, and that was Hamath. And then if you look at how Hamath descended according to their story, because this was the time frame of the information, all right? Hamath came out of Canaan, who came out of Ham, right? Moab came out of Lot, out of Lot's kingdom. Lot was the grandson of Terah. Abraham was the son of Terah. So when we were the Nubian Islamic Hebrews, when we learned Genesis 15, 13 to 16 applied to us, that sounded crazy. because we were Nubian, we were Islamic and Hebrews. So we were coming out of Ishmael and Jacob. And I hate to go back to that, but Doc has to go back to that. If you look at some of the latest information, it's going back to the Bible. But what we as the Wapians, we're not in that mind state when we question Doc. We're supposed to be in Wunuwap when we question Doc. But because so many of us were in that mind state when he came, we are affectionately and emotionally attached to Genesis 15, 13 through 16. So when Doc is going back and saying the Adamites was the pink, red, bloody race, and then out of Adam came Noah, then came Abraham, came Jacob, came Ishmael, came the Midianites, so none of that is us. We're having a problem with that. But here's what Doc says in the history of Psalm's book that'll be coming out, Qᴜᴇsᴛ. He says that what Psalm's did, despite any effort that the Adamite had in any religious school, any degree, he said that Psalm's put a pure seed in there. So in Ham's seed, even though cursed Buchanan and he had 11 sons, they stuck a pure seed in there, which is Ham. And trust me, it's a long build, I won't go into it, but it was right. Doc said many of us here in North America are the descendants of Ham in that degree, but that's not all of us. Us as Wunuwap in this day and time, Nuwapu, we should know we go as far back as Psalm with the primary creation. But we're all that in the bag of chips. We were the Moabites, and Doc said, because if you go back to the story, the way the prophet Noah taught it, the Moabites who came out of Lot, they migrated into Syria. And then the Hamathites migrated into Syria, and they mixed genes. So the prophet Noah was right when he said, we are Moabite, we are Hamathite, and we're Canaanite by way of Hamath. All right? So some of us, many of us in the continent of North America, who are African, did come out of that Hamathite seed, because it's still African. And Doc said through Islam, they injected the pure Nagaru seed through Kedar. Through Jesus, they injected the pure Nagaru seed through Judah. And through, Moses, they injected the pure Nagaru seed through, here it comes. But Doc Bell, this is some of the new scrolls that are coming out, and he says, Nagaru never left us alone, despite what they were working on. They put a pure Nagaru seed in every last one of them. And so that's how we relate to that. So it's not that we're not, Genesis 15, 13, 16 doesn't apply to us. It applies to some of the blacks in the wilderness of North America who came out of that Hamathite seed, but not all of us. I know it's late.
Real quick. So when I came into Wunuwap, I'm not really from a religious background at all. So when we get into the religion and you break it down that way, I kind of get a little lost because I didn't know that anybody in the Bible existed. Like, you can't prove their existence.
I stopped there on purpose.
Okay.
Because God explains all of that, and then later on he says, because the Judahites take ownership, or the Jebusites, or the so-called pale Jews, they take ownership of it all by saying they come out of the house of Abraham that birthed all the monotheistic religions, right? Doc says, so going back to the point, if I interpret by way of your question, and you come from a hard Christian background, I can only talk Bible to you because you won't hear nothing else I'm saying. If I think you're coming from a hard Islamic background, I have to try to bring you out of that through the Quran, or you won't hear what I'm saying. Now, if you're coming to me from an 8th gate perspective, we may have to talk Yoruba, or you won't understand or you won't even try to hear what I'm saying. If you're coming from a Masonic background, I'm going to first have to walk the sword with you, or you won't hear nothing that I'm saying. And that's how cold the master teacher is. That's how ill he is. So you didn't come from a religious background. So you don't need to hear Abraham, Ishmael, Jacob, and all of that. But you were fortunate enough to be born with that awareness already. Everybody wasn't. Most blacks in America, especially in the South, in that Bible Belt. So Doc says we have to identify that this person is coming from hard religion. And if I don't say God, if I don't say angels, if I don't say heaven, devil, and the prophets, they won't hear me when I try to give them Wunuwap. So those bills aren't for you.
I understand.
Hold on. And then Doc says, because after he explains all of that, he says, now Jerusalem claimed Abraham. They tried to go to the source. He said, all throughout Jerusalem, they found millions of bones. But they would never scientifically say that any one of them belongs to anybody in the scriptures from Adam to now. He said, so therefore there's still no scientific proof that any of them existed. But if you ask me, and I sense you're a Christian, let's talk Jesus.
I get what you're saying. But when I propagate or when I try to relay the doctrine to other people who are coming from that background and try to kind of bring them, because they said they're conscious, so to speak. So they read historical books, so how would I be able to relate what we learn in religion to history to Nuwapu? Like,
it's not something you're going to get overnight. A lot of brothers are snickering because they propagate every day and have done so for about the last 20 years. It's a skill that you develop over time, and you have to be an adept student. Doc covered through the Christ series and the Degree of Christism book anything you need to know from A to Z to talk about Jesus. He covered through the degree of the Nubian Hebrews anything from A to Z we need to talk to somebody who's coming from a Judaic or Hebrew background. And then he taught us through the Ansar community anything we need to speak with a person that's trapped in that degree of Islam from A to Z. So that's why I said as a new person to the information, you have a lot of reading to do to be able to adequately meet people where they are. Otherwise, you direct them to class. And that's sometimes your best tool, or let the books talk for itself. I learned we don't convert people. First of all, they have to be genetically programmed to be predisposed to accept the Wapo. And if that's the case, just hand them the Wapo. And that's where the humility comes in. So sis, I can't explain it to you, or brother, I can't explain it to you in depth like my master teacher can. But here, since you asked me a question about Jesus, read this book that he wrote about it. Or come to class with me on Fridays, where the brothers fire away. You fire away any questions and the brothers walk you through the scriptures like that. That's cool, because that helps you not feel the pressure to always have the answer. This is what doctors tell us, don't be afraid to say I don't know. So, be patient with yourself. And in the meantime, you have a lot of reading to do. To kind of, that's what that phrase you keep hearing someone say, you have to walk that long journey on a short path. And the later you come into Wunuwap, that path is shorter for you. You get what I'm saying? To kind of get that in. And Doc said that's good, it works out, because that means you ain't got no time to BS. He said, I wrote too many books. I got too much information out there that you have not gotten into to be out here getting into some of the stuff that we get into. You get what I'm saying? So just be patient with yourself as a student, as an adept, as a seeker. You get what I'm saying? Do the knowledge and help people when you can. Give them the facts. And if you don't know, you don't know. But you can always say, I know where I get the answer from. Anything else? And I really curtailed, we probably pick it up another time. The Genesis 15:13 deal, that's Doc actually kills it. I told y'all, when a brother asked at the end of class, I said, later I'm gonna wrap up, but I was just studying something. He murders the whole subject matter. You get what I'm saying? But he points out that when that was introduced to us, that was the climate of the country we were in at the time. We wanted to be those things, and he had to meet us there. And the mentality we primarily forged through the teachings of the Noble Prophet Noble Ali, who Doc said was part of the opening of the seventh seal. He said he has no problem with that, and to this day, y'all see the new Quran Circle 7 come out. Wow. Doc says in the original Quran Circle 7, that was page 47, but in mine it's page 74. That's how much he exploded each page to break down the Quran Circle 7 and how right and how wise the Prophet Noble Ali was. He said he specifically, he knew about leprosy, he knew about the curse on Canaan, he knew about the curse of the Caucasus. He knew about them being bred in Cappadocia and Turkey, and then they took the queens and took them over to the Asian islands. He said that's why he was very specific to only mention Moab, Hamath, of the Canaanites. All right, but we'll get more to that, hopefully on another class. On that note, I know it's always something good in the back. Appreciate y'all patience, and travel safe. And of course, on the bad, it's innocent. I challenge anybody to challenge.